Marcus stood there with his laptop bag strap cutting into his shoulder, watching the frosted glass turn him into a blurry outline. Inside, he could hear chairs scooting, someone laughing too loud, and the dull thump of a screen being plugged in. His phone buzzed again in his pocket, a long vibration that felt like a warning. A half-melted Starbucks cup sweated in his hand, the lid tilted, cold coffee sloshing against plastic. He had been told to be here at 9 o'clock. He had been told this meeting mattered. The manager didn't look up from his tablet. "You're not on the list," he said, like reading a line he'd memorized. "You can wait outside." Marcus swallowed, forcing his voice to stay even. "I'm here for the deal." The manager finally glanced at him, eyes quick and dismissive. "No, you're not." Marcus stared at the door, then down at his buzzing phone. The screen lit up with one name, Nina Rios, and one message, "Call me now," before they sign the wrong thing. Atlanta mornings were polite and sharp. The air was cool enough to make Marcus pull his jacket tight, but not cold enough to feel like winter. Traffic moved like it always did, half awake and impatient. He had parked too far away because the building's garage cost more than he wanted to pay, and every step toward the glass tower felt like a step into someone else's life. On the sidewalk, people flowed around him in work shoes and earbuds. A woman in a blazer talked into her headset, her voice bright and practiced. Someone else balanced a breakfast sandwich and a laptop. Marcus tried to match their pace without looking like he was trying. He was 34, tall, careful with his posture because he'd learned years ago that people watched. He dressed like a person who belonged in a meeting like this. Dark slacks, clean shirt, a simple watch. Not flashy. Just solid. His shoes weren't new, but they were polished. That morning, he'd stood in his bathroom with the light too harsh and stared at his own face longer than usual. Not out of vanity. Out of checking. Checking for tiredness. Checking if stress showed. Checking if the world would read him right. His apartment was 15 minutes away on a good day, a one-bedroom he used to feel proud of. Now it felt like a place he couldn't quite afford. Rent had crept up again. Groceries did not feel like groceries anymore. Even his phone bill irritated him, not because it was huge, but because every little thing stacked. He hadn't been sleeping much. Not because of parties or late nights. Because his brain didn't know how to shut off. 2 months ago, his mom had called him with that careful voice parents use when they don't want to scare you. "It's not an emergency," she said, and then explained that her hours at the hospital cafeteria had been cut. She tried to laugh about it. She said she'd figure it out. Marcus heard the truth anyway. He'd sent her money the same day and told her not to argue. He'd also not told her that his own savings account was thinner than she would have liked. Then there was Keisha. They had been together 4 years. She worked at a public middle school and came home with stories that sat heavy in her chest. She used to tell them to Marcus while she cooked, while music played from her phone on the counter. Lately, she didn't tell them. Lately, she just moved through the apartment quietly, like she was trying not to bump into him. A week ago she had said, "You're here, but you're not really here." Marcus had wanted to argue, but he didn't have energy for a fight. He had sat on the couch and looked at the corner of the rug where the fibers were worn down. "I'm trying," he'd said. Keisha had nodded like she'd heard that line before. "I know. But trying isn't the same as showing up." He thought about that now as he walked through the lobby doors, where air conditioning hit his skin like a clean slap. The building smelled like new carpet and lemon cleaner. The lobby had a fountain that made a soft, constant sound. The kind of sound that was meant to calm you while you waited to be approved. At the security desk, he gave his name, and the guard scanned him with the same tired eyes he probably used on everyone. "You got a meeting?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Westbrook Partners. 9th floor." The guard checked his screen, paused. "Ha." Marcus kept his face neutral. "Is it not there?" The guard tapped again. "It's something. Hold on." He leaned toward the monitor, squinting. Then he printed a visitor badge anyway, like it wasn't worth the trouble to figure out. Go ahead. Elevator to your left. Marcus took the badge and clipped it on. The plastic felt cheap. The name looked too big. Visitor. Like he didn't already know. In the elevator, he stared at his reflection in the brushed metal. He didn't look like someone out of place. He looked like a man going to work. That was what made it sting when people treated him like he was asking for something extra. The 9th floor was quiet in a way that felt staged. A wall of glass, a hallway of framed company awards, a receptionist desk with a bowl of mints that no one ever ate. The receptionist smiled politely, but her eyes moved over him like a checklist. Hi, Marcus said. I'm here for the 9 o'clock meeting. Conference room B. She clicked a few keys. Name. Marcus Hill. Her smile tightened for half a second. One moment. Marcus watched her scroll, her eyes getting narrower like she was trying to fix a problem she didn't want to admit existed. She looked up, still smiling, still polite. I don't see you on the calendar. He swallowed the irritation that rose too fast. I was invited yesterday. By Jonah Price. At that, she looked relieved, like she recognized a name that meant protection. Okay. Yes. I see the meeting. It's in conference room C, actually. Down the hall. Thank you, Marcus said. As he walked, his phone buzzed with a text from Keisha. Did you eat anything? He stared at it. The question was simple. It was also what love looked like when it was tired and still trying. He typed back, not yet. After this. He added, love you, and then deleted it before sending. He didn't know why. Maybe because he wasn't sure if saying it would fix anything. Maybe because it felt like a promise he didn't want to cheapen. He put the phone away and kept walking. Conference room C was packed. People he recognized from email threads, people in expensive suits, people whose job titles seemed to exist just to sound important. The big screen on the wall showed a slide with a clean logo and numbers in neat rows. Marcus took a slow breath. This was the meeting. This was the one Jonah had said would set the tone. He stepped to the door, and before he could fully enter, a man moved in front of him. The manager. Marcus had seen him once before in a hallway. Same haircut, same tight smile, same energy like he never had enough time for the people in front of him. He held a tablet and a stylus like they were part of his body. You're not on the list, the manager said without looking up. Marcus blinked. I'm sorry. We have limited seating, the manager said, still not making eye contact. This is an internal meeting. If you're here for facilities or catering, check with the front desk. Marcus felt heat climb his neck, not the loud kind, the kind that made you want to disappear just so you didn't have to keep being polite. He kept his voice level. I'm not facilities. I'm here for the Westbrook Partners discussion. The manager finally looked up. His eyes did that quick scan again, the one Marcus knew too well. Who are you? Marcus Hill, Marcus said. Jonah Price asked me to attend. The manager's mouth twitched, like he didn't like being corrected. Jonah didn't put you on the list. If you're not on the list, you can wait outside. Inside the room, someone laughed again. Someone else said, let's keep moving, like time was money and feelings were a delay. Marcus stood there for a second, holding his coffee, his visitor badge shining under the fluorescent lights. He could feel how easy it would be to step back and swallow it. How easy it would be to become invisible so nobody got uncomfortable. His phone buzzed in his pocket, long and urgent. He pulled it out. Nina Rios. And a message that made his stomach tighten. Call me now. Before they sign the wrong thing. Marcus stared at the door, at the manager's tablet, at the meeting that had decided he didn't belong. Then he lifted the phone to his ear. And the manager frowned, like he could sense something shifting. Marcus stepped away from the door, not because he felt small, but because he needed space to think. He walked down the hall until the noise from the meeting dulled into a low hum. The carpet muffled his steps. The walls were covered in framed mission statements that talked about innovation and inclusion in fonts that felt carefully chosen. He answered the call. Nina, he said quietly. Where are you right now? Her voice came through sharp but controlled, the way people sound when they're trying not to let stress leak out. 9th floor. Outside the conference room. A pause. Not long, but enough to carry weight. Are you inside? No, Marcus said. He leaned against the wall and stared at the exit sign glowing red above the door. They didn't let me in. Another pause. This one longer. He could picture Nina pressing her lips together, eyes narrowing the way they did when she was annoyed but thinking. Who stopped you? She asked. The floor manager. Said I wasn't on the list. Nina let out a slow breath. Of course he did. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. Look, if this is bad timing. No, she cut in. This is perfect timing. You need to listen to me. He straightened, his shoulder leaving the wall. Okay. I just reviewed the final draft they're about to approve, Nina said. The numbers don't match what we agreed on. They changed the structure. Quietly. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Changed how? They moved the risk, she said. It looks clean on the slide deck, but it shifts long-term liability onto the investment side. Onto us. Marcus ran a hand over his face. That's not what we signed off on. I know, Nina said. That's why I'm calling you. You're the only one who noticed the early discrepancy last month. Remember that late-night call? He remembered. Sitting at his kitchen table with bills spread out, Keisha asleep in the bedroom, and Nina on speaker while they walked through spreadsheets line by line. He had almost missed it. Almost. They're about to lock in a $300 million commitment, Nina continued. And if they do it with this structure, it's going to blow back in ways nobody in that room is thinking about. Marcus glanced back down the hallway toward the conference room. The door was still closed. The meeting was still moving without him. They don't even know who I am, he said quietly. Nina's voice softened, just a touch. I know. That's why this is hard. But that doesn't change the fact that you're the one with the clearest view of this deal. Marcus felt the familiar resistance rise up. The voice that said, stay in your lane. Don't push. Don't make it awkward. He had spent years learning when to speak and when silence was safer. I can email Jonah, he said. Flag the issue. I already did, Nina replied. He's in the room. He won't see it until it's too late. Marcus exhaled through his nose. His phone felt heavier in his hand. So what are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to trust yourself, Nina said. And to interrupt. He almost laughed. You heard what just happened, right? Yes, she said. And I also know that room is full of people who don't want friction. But friction is exactly what stops bad decisions. Marcus looked down at his visitor badge again. Visitor. The word felt smaller now, less defining. I don't want to make this about ego, he said. Or assumptions. It's not, Nina replied. It's about clarity. And accountability. He thought about Keisha's words. Trying isn't the same as showing up. What if I get it wrong? He asked. Nina didn't hesitate. Then we own it. Together. That did something to him. The word together. It wasn't a promise of rescue. It was a shared weight. Okay, Marcus said. Okay. Nina echoed. Okay, he repeated, firmer. Tell me exactly what to say. She did. Calmly. Clearly. She walked him through the key point, not in jargon, but in plain language. How the adjustment looked minor on the surface. How it shifted consequences down the line. How the risk landed on people who wouldn't be in that room anymore when it mattered. As she spoke, Marcus felt his nerves settle into something steadier. Not confidence exactly. Preparedness. Marcus, Nina said before hanging up. One more thing. Yeah. You're not asking for permission, she said. You're preventing a mistake. The call ended. Marcus stood there for a moment, letting the hallway come back into focus. The hum of the building. The faint smell of coffee. The muted voices behind the door. His phone buzzed again. A text from Keisha. "Good luck today. No matter what happens." He stared at it, surprised. He hadn't told her about the meeting trouble. Maybe she just knew. Maybe she always did. He typed back, "Thank you. That means more than you know." This time, he didn't delete it. Marcus walked back toward the conference room. Each step felt deliberate, like he was choosing it instead of being carried by momentum. When he reached the door, the manager was still there, standing to the side now, laughing at something someone inside had said. Marcus stopped in front of him. "I need 30 seconds, Marcus said. The manager turned, irritation already forming. "I told you." 30 seconds, Marcus repeated, not louder, just steadier. "Then you can ask me to leave again." The manager looked around, aware of eyes now. A few people inside had noticed the exchange through the glass. "We're in the middle of." "I know exactly where you are," Marcus said. "And I know what slide you're on." That gave the manager pause. Marcus took a breath. His heart was beating fast, but his voice didn't shake. The structure on the current proposal shifts long-term liability away from the operating group and onto the investment side. It's subtle, but it changes the risk profile in a way that contradicts the original agreement. The room went quiet. Chairs stopped moving. Someone cleared their throat. The manager frowned. "Who told you that?" "I read it," Marcus said. "Because it's my job to." A man near the screen leaned forward. "Wait," he said. "Can you repeat that?" Marcus did. Slower this time. Plainer. The manager looked like he wanted to cut the moment off, but it had already slipped out of his control. From the far end of the table, Jonah Price finally spoke. "Marcus," he said, sounding surprised. "Why aren't you in the room?" Marcus met his eyes through the glass. "I wasn't on the list." Silence sat heavy for a beat longer than comfort. Then Jonah stood. "He should be," he said. The manager stepped aside without being asked. Marcus walked into the room, not with triumph, but with focus. He felt every eye on him, weighing him, reassessing. He placed his coffee down on the table, finally empty now. "Let me show you what you're about to sign," Marcus said. And for the first time that morning, no one interrupted him. The room felt smaller once Marcus was inside it. Not physically smaller. Emotionally. Like the air had thickened and everyone could feel it. The kind of tension that didn't come from anger, but from realizing something important had almost been missed. Marcus stood near the table, hands resting lightly on the edge, aware of how visible he was now. A moment ago, he had been a problem outside the door. Now he was a variable inside the equation. He pulled his laptop out slowly, giving himself a second to breathe. "Before I start," he said, his voice calm but careful, "I want to be clear. This isn't about blame. It's about understanding what happens after the headlines and handshakes." A few people nodded. Others leaned back, arms crossed. The manager sat stiffly, eyes locked on his tablet, jaw tight. Marcus clicked to the slide Nina had warned him about. It looked harmless. Clean bars. Confident percentages. The kind of slide that made people feel smart for approving it. When this clause was adjusted, Marcus said, pointing, it changed who absorbs the downside in year 3 and beyond. On paper, it protects operations. In reality, it shifts exposure to the investment partners. Someone near the end of the table frowned. "That wasn't our intent." "I don't think it was," Marcus said. "But intent doesn't change outcome." As he spoke, he felt something unexpected rise up. Not fear. Sadness. Because this moment wasn't just about the deal. It was about how close he had come to not being here at all. How easily this conversation would have happened without him. How often that happened in other rooms, other buildings, other versions of his life. He remembered sitting at his kitchen table weeks earlier, papers spread out, Keisha asleep down the hall. He had almost closed the file that night. Almost told himself it wasn't his responsibility. Almost chosen rest over care. The thought made his chest tighten. A woman across the table spoke up. If we move forward as is, what's the long-term impact? Marcus answered her directly. Numbers. Timelines. Real consequences. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't dramatize. He trusted the truth to do its work. As the discussion picked up, the room shifted. People asked questions. Real ones. The kind that slowed momentum, but improved direction. The manager finally looked up. Why wasn't this flagged earlier? He asked, his tone sharper than it needed to be. Marcus felt that familiar pressure again. The unspoken challenge. Explain yourself. Prove you belong here. He paused before answering. It was flagged, Marcus said. In an internal review note last month. The manager frowned. I didn't see that. It was attached, Marcus replied. Page 3. Jonah glanced at the manager, then back at Marcus. I remember that note, he said. We didn't circle back. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was uncomfortable. The kind that forces honesty into the room whether people want it or not. Marcus felt his heart beating faster now. Not because he was scared of being wrong, but because he knew exactly what this moment meant. He could feel the edge of it. For years, he had learned to smooth himself down, to soften his voice, to avoid being seen as difficult. He had learned that competence alone wasn't always enough, that timing, tone, and perception mattered just as much. But standing there, he realized something that surprised him. Being quiet had never protected him the way he thought it did. Jonah cleared his throat. We need to pause approval, he said. Review this section properly. A few heads nodded. One person sighed, but no one argued. The manager leaned back in his chair, arms crossed now. His expression wasn't angry. It was unsettled. Like the room had just reminded him of something he didn't want to examine. As the meeting shifted into next steps, Marcus felt a strange emptiness settle in. Not relief. Not victory. Just exhaustion. When it ended, people packed up quickly. A few stopped to thank him. Polite. Professional. One man shook his hand and said, Good catch. Another said, Glad you spoke up. The manager didn't say anything. He walked past Marcus without meeting his eyes. Marcus didn't chase acknowledgement. He watched the room empty instead, the chairs pushed back into place, the screen going dark. The energy drained out as fast as it had built up. He stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall, finally letting his shoulders drop. His phone buzzed. Keisha again. How did it go? Marcus stared at the message longer than he meant to. He felt the weight of the morning press down on him now that the adrenaline was fading. I think I did the right thing, he typed. A pause. Then 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. I'm proud of you, Keisha wrote. For showing up. The words hit harder than anything said in that room. Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about how close he'd been to walking away from the door. How close he'd been to telling himself it wasn't worth the trouble. How many times he'd done that before in smaller ways. This wasn't a breaking point because something shattered. It was a breaking point because something finally cracked open. He realized he had spent years measuring himself by how little space he took up, by how well he could move through systems without disturbing them. Standing there now, he understood the cost of that strategy. It hadn't kept him safe. It had just kept him unseen. Nina called a few minutes later. I heard, she said. Marcus smiled faintly. You heard fast. That's what happens when people realize a deal almost went sideways, she replied. How are you? He considered the question. Tired, he said honestly. But clear. Good, Nina said. That clarity matters more than you think. After the call ended, Marcus pushed himself off the wall and walked toward the elevator. The ride down felt quieter than the ride up. Less performative. More real. As the doors opened to the lobby, he caught his reflection again. Same face. Same clothes. Different posture. He stepped outside into the Atlanta air, pulled out his phone, and called Keisha. She answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he replied. "Can we talk tonight?" "Really talk?" There was a pause. Then, "Yeah," she said. "I'd like that." Marcus ended the call and stood there for a moment, letting the city move around him. The deal wasn't finished. His life wasn't fixed. Nothing magical had happened. But something had shifted inside him. And once that happens, it's hard to go back. That evening, Marcus didn't rush home. He sat in his car in the parking lot for a few minutes, hands resting on the steering wheel, phone face down in the cup holder. The radio was off. The silence felt earned, not empty. A tear slipped out before he noticed it happening, landing on the worn leather where his thumb usually rested. He didn't wipe it away right away. He let it be there. Proof of something released. The drive back through Atlanta was slow, the sky turning that flat gray blue it always did before night. He passed the same exits he'd taken 100 times. The same gas station with flickering lights. The same billboard promising fresh starts that no one believed in anymore. At a red light, his phone buzzed again. An email this time. From Jonah. Subject line simple. "Thank you." Marcus didn't open it yet. He already knew what it would say. Appreciation. Professional acknowledgement. Maybe a mention of future opportunities. Useful words. Necessary words. But they weren't what his chest needed right now. He pulled into his apartment complex and parked in his usual spot near the back, where the paint lines were faded. Upstairs, the hallway smelled like someone's dinner. Fried onions. Garlic. Life happening behind closed doors. Keisha was sitting on the couch when he walked in, legs tucked under her, laptop open but ignored. She looked up immediately. No phone in her hand. No distraction. "You look tired," she said. He set his keys down and nodded. "I am." She waited. Didn't rush him. That alone felt like a gift. Marcus sat beside her, close but not touching yet. He stared at the coffee table, at the old coaster with a chip in the corner. "I almost walked away today," he said. "From something that mattered." Keisha turned toward him fully. "Why?" "Because it would have been easier," he replied. "Because I didn't want to be seen as difficult. Or dramatic. Or out of place." She listened, her face soft but serious. "And what stopped you?" Marcus thought about Nina's voice. About the buzzing phone. About the meeting door closing. "I realized that staying quiet was costing me more than speaking up ever did." Keisha reached for his hand then. Just rested her fingers on his knuckles. "I've been waiting for you to believe that." The words didn't accuse. They didn't blame. They just existed. They talked for a long time. About money. About fear. About how stress had made them smaller versions of themselves. Marcus admitted how tired he'd been of carrying everything quietly. Keisha admitted how lonely it felt to watch him disappear into responsibility. Nothing was magically solved. Rent was still due. Her job was still exhausting. His work would still ask him to prove himself again tomorrow. But they were sitting in the same truth now. Later that night, Marcus finally opened Jonah's email. It was professional. Appreciative. Direct. There was also a sentence near the end that made him pause. "We should have made space for your voice sooner. That's on us." Marcus leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. He didn't feel vindicated. He felt something quieter. Seen. The following weeks didn't turn him into a different man. They just sharpened him. At work, people asked his opinion more often. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just naturally. The manager avoided him at first, then eventually nodded in the hallway. No apology came. Marcus didn't need one. He wasn't chasing closure anymore. Nina invited him to lunch one afternoon at a small cafe near her office. They sat outside with chipped mugs and talked about work like two people who trusted each other. "You know," she said, stirring her coffee, "you didn't just save the deal." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "No. You changed how they'll listen next time," she said. "That matters." He nodded. "It took me too long to realize that my voice doesn't need permission." That night, Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and watched Keisha get ready for sleep. The routine felt gentler now. Less fragile. "You ever think about how many rooms we almost didn't walk into?" she asked. "All the time," he said. She smiled softly. "I'm glad you walked into this one." Weeks later, Marcus passed the same conference room again. Different meeting. Different people. The door was open this time. He paused for half a second. Not out of fear. Out of choice. Then he walked in. Because the lesson wasn't that power always announces itself. Sometimes power looks like a man who knows his worth even when others don't yet. Sometimes it looks like staying when it would be easier to leave. And sometimes, the biggest changes don't come with applause. They come quietly. With a door that finally stays open. If this story resonated with you, share what moment in your life made you realize your voice mattered too.